My name is Lana. I'm 27 years old. 3 months after getting married, I found out I was pregnant. But instead of celebration, my mother-in-law pointed her finger at me and said, "Are you sure that baby's even my son's?" I stood frozen. My husband said nothing, just stared at the floor like her words were perfectly reasonable. I swallowed my pride to keep this family together. But when the baby was born, the DNA test I handed them made their whole house fall silent. And if you think that was the end of it, you're wrong. My story had only just begun. If you've ever been doubted, disrespected, or felt completely alone, even in your own family, stay with me till the end. I promise you'll find a piece of yourself in my journey. And hey, if this story hits home, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps more women find their voice too. I don't know which moment broke me more. The one when I held that positive pregnancy test with trembling hands and a heart full of joy. Or the one when my mother-in-law looked me straight in the eye and sneered, "You got pregnant fast." Were you tracking your ovulation or just hoping for a miracle? My name is Lana. I live in Austin, Texas. I met Josh at a mutual friend's birthday party. He was tall, charming, and had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room. We fell fast and hard. Less than a year later, we were married. Too soon? Maybe, but I loved him deeply. And I knew that he loved me too. His mother, Alina, was the kind of woman who spoke softly but carried a dagger in every word. The first time I met her, she scanned me from head to toe like she was mentally tagging prices on everything I wore. "So petite," she said, barely hiding her smirk. "Hope you don't have trouble during childbirth." That was her welcome. Josh just laughed it off. "That's mom for you," he said, like it was some quirky trait I should find endearing. I tried. I really did. But there was always something in her tone that felt like a test I could never pass. After the wedding, we moved into a small house not far from Alina. Josh said it made sense. We could save up and have family support nearby when we started having kids. I didn't mind. I thought she might warm up to me eventually. She didn't. 3 months into the marriage, I felt the changes, nausea in the morning, cravings for things I never liked, emotions swinging like a pendulum. I bought a pregnancy test on a whim, took it while Josh was out running errands. 2 pink lines. I cried. I laughed through tears. I took 3 more tests just to be sure. Then I waited by the door like a kid on Christmas morning until Josh came home. "You're going to be a dad," I told him, holding out the test. He blinked. "Already?" he said, then smiled, pulled me into a hug. "Wow, that's amazing." He said all the right things, but something in his eyes flickered just for a second. I brushed it off. The next day, we told Alina. She looked at me, then at Josh, then back at me. Her expression didn't change. That's quick," she said. "It wasn't planned," I said, smiling nervously. "But we're happy. You sure it's my son's baby?" The room went quiet. I looked at Josh, waiting, begging silently for him to say something, to defend me. He cleared his throat and said, "Mom, come on." That was it. That was all he said. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the cold tile floor and stared at the faint lines on my test. I had never felt so small. The following weeks were a blur of polite tension. Alina would drop by unannounced with soup or prenatal vitamins, pretending to be helpful while making sly comments like, "Sometimes women mistake who the father is when they're two." Excited before marriage, Josh never corrected her. He never pulled her aside. He never chose me. I started journaling. Every word she said, every time Josh went silent. Not because I was planning revenge. Not yet. But because I needed proof for myself that I wasn't crazy. Then one morning, Alina asked if I'd considered a paternity test. I choked on my cereal. "Are you serious? It's standard these days, isn't it? For peace of mind." Peace of mind? Her words echoed all day. I finally told Josh I wanted us to move out. He hesitated, said we should stay until the baby came, so I stayed. But something inside me changed. The joy of pregnancy turned into anxiety. I went to doctor appointments alone. I decorated the nursery by myself. Josh drifted. He worked late, stopped asking how I felt, smiled less, kissed me less. One night, I found a text on his phone from a coworker named Bree. "I wish you were here instead of there. She doesn't understand you like I do." My hands went cold. My chest tightened. I didn't confront him, not yet. I took a screenshot, emailed it to myself. My brain was fog, but a sharp voice inside me whispered, "Be quiet, be smart." By the 7th month, I had made a decision. I would give birth and I would get a DNA test. Not to prove anything to Alina, not even to Josh, to myself, because deep down I knew they were wrong, and someday they'd know it too. The night before I went into labor, I couldn't sleep. The baby kicked like he was trying to dig his way out, and my mind wouldn't shut up. The house was dark, quiet, too quiet. Josh was passed out on the couch, snoring faintly with his phone face down on the coffee table. He'd fallen asleep in front of the TV again, not unusual. I walked into the nursery and sat in the rocking chair, the one I had picked out and assembled myself. The walls were painted pale blue, with little white stars I had stenciled on during one of my lonelier weekends. I looked around the room and whispered to my belly, "You and me, kid. No matter what." By morning, the contractions were steady. I woke Josh. He panicked more than I did, scrambling to pack a bag even though I had packed it a month ago. Alina met us at the hospital. Of course she did. She showed up with a full face of makeup and a camera around her neck like she was about to shoot a magazine cover, not witness her grandchild being born. The delivery was long, complicated. I tore, I screamed, I cried. And then, finally, he was here, my son. They placed him on my chest, all slippery and red and furious with life. And I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Not because of the pain, but because of the love. "He's got Josh's eyes," one nurse said. I looked at him, my husband, standing there frozen, staring down at the baby with an expression I couldn't read. Awe, fear, doubt. Alina pushed her way to the front. "Let me see," she said. She peered down and nodded slowly. Hard to say who he looks like yet. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I held my son close and shut the world out. Over the next few days, the house filled with visitors, Josh's coworkers, his cousins, Alina's bridge club ladies. Everyone came with casseroles and questions. I smiled. I thanked them. I let them hold the baby, but I kept my plan to myself. On the 3rd day home, while Josh was out running errands and Alina was busy showing off the baby to some neighbor, I made the call. The DNA test would be discreet, they promised. Just a swab, no big deal. 2 days later, the kit arrived in a plain brown envelope. I waited until the house was empty. Then I took the samples, mine and my son's, and sealed them up. I wrote for my own piece in the return label slot, just to remind myself why I was doing this. When Josh came home that evening, I asked him to hold the baby so I could shower. I watched him from the bathroom door as he looked down at our son like he was still trying to solve a puzzle. I mailed the package the next morning. The wait nearly killed me. I checked my email obsessively, refreshed the tracking page every hour, tried to pretend everything was normal. Josh was distant, not cruel, not mean, just gone. His body was home, but his mind was somewhere else. Alina continued her passive-aggressive campaign of doubt. One afternoon, she brought over a photo album and started flipping through baby pictures of Josh. See, he had a much more pointed nose, and his ears didn't stick out like that. I said nothing, just nodded while my insides twisted. When the email finally came, I was standing at the kitchen sink, washing bottles. My phone buzzed. I dried my hands on my shirt and opened it. My hands trembled as I clicked the link. 99% match. Josh was the father, no doubt. No room for questions, just the cold, hard numbers of truth. I sat down. Laughed, cried, maybe both. Relief doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it looks like exhaustion finally getting permission to collapse. I printed the result, put it in an envelope, wrote for a leaner on the front, then I waited. She came over that Saturday, brought muffins. "You're looking tired," she said. "Motherhood not what you expected?" "Actually," I said, "I've got something for you." I handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly, like she expected a thank you card. Her eyes scanned the paper, her lips tightened. She didn't say a word. Josh came in just then, holding the baby. "Mom," he asked, "everything okay?" She handed him the paper, turned, walked out. Josh read it, blinked. Then he looked at me. "Why? Why did you do this?" And that, dear listener, was the moment I knew. Even proof wasn't going to fix what was broken between us. "Because I had to," I said. "Because no one else believed me." I thought the DNA results would bring closure. Instead, they opened a new door, one that led into a house already on fire. Josh barely spoke to me for 2 days. When he did, it was short, mechanical. Like he was reading from a script. "How's the baby? Did you eat? Where's the burp cloth?" Nothing that mattered. Nothing that made me feel seen. He never mentioned the DNA test again. Neither did his mother. But the air between us was different now, heavier. Like we'd buried something, not resolved it. The worst part, I started blaming myself. Was I wrong to get the test? Did I betray him by not telling him first? No. I reminded myself, they were the ones who doubted. I just gave them what they asked for. Still, I was tired. Not just from sleepless nights with a newborn, but from pretending like our lives hadn't cracked straight down the middle. One night, while Josh was in the shower, I opened his laptop. Not to snoop, I told myself, just to check. The moment it unlocked, guilt punched me in the chest, but curiosity was louder. Emails, calendar, search history. Nothing damning until I found the photos folder. Inside was a subfolder titled Bree. I clicked. Hundreds of pictures, selfies, screenshots of texts. A few of her in lingerie, some clearly taken at our house. My breath caught. My heart didn't just break, it disintegrated. This wasn't harmless flirting. This was betrayal. Intimate, repeated, deliberate. I closed the laptop. Sat there in the dim light of our bedroom, the sound of the shower still running like white noise for a life that was no longer mine. When he came out, towel around his waist, I looked at him for a long time. "Who is Bree?" I asked. He froze just for a second, then kept walking like he didn't hear me. "Josh." He stopped, turned. "Don't do this," he said. "You did this." "Not me." He looked down at the floor like it held the answers he didn't want to say out loud. "It didn't mean anything," he mumbled. "You don't take pictures of something that means nothing." He sighed. "It was before you got pregnant. It's over." "Does your mother know?" His head snapped up. That got his attention. "What? No, and she doesn't need to." I nodded. "Of course not. Because in this family, image matters more than truth." He didn't answer. Just went to the closet and pulled out a shirt. Like the conversation was over. But it wasn't over. Not for me. The next morning, I packed a bag for the baby and one for myself. I didn't say a word to Josh, just left a note. "I need time. Don't call. Don't come looking. Take care of yourself." I drove to my sister's place across town. She opened the door in pajamas, eyes wide. "Lana, what?" "I just need to stay a while." She didn't ask, just stepped aside and took the baby from my arms. That night, I cried in a stranger's bed that wasn't strange at all. My sister made tea, turned on white noise, watched my son so I could sleep for more than an hour. It was the first time in weeks I didn't feel like I was failing. The next morning, I woke up to a message from a leaner. "You made your point. Come back and be a wife." I laughed out loud, a bitter, exhausted laugh. She still thought this was about proving a point. I blocked her number. Josh didn't call. Didn't text. The silence said everything. For the first time since this all began, I started thinking not about how to fix the marriage, but about whether it deserved to be fixed at all. And I began to plan. Living at my sister's place was supposed to be temporary, but days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. And every time I thought about going back, my chest tightened like I was bracing for another punch to the gut. Emily, my sister, was calm, gentle, and fiercely loyal. She didn't ask a lot of questions, just gave me space. Watched the baby while I took long showers, made late-night grilled cheese when I couldn't sleep, held me when the tears came out of nowhere. She didn't need to say it, but I knew she hated Josh, hated what he'd done, hated how small I'd become trying to hold a crumbling marriage together. One afternoon, while the baby napped, she sat next to me on the couch and said, "You don't have to go back, you know, even if you think you should." I didn't answer, but the words stuck. The truth was, I didn't know who I was outside of that house. Outside of being Josh's wife, Alina's disappointment, or the mother to a baby they doubted. But here, in Emily's apartment, I started to remember. I started going on walks with the stroller, downloaded a meditation app, took small freelance gigs online, copywriting, editing, whatever I could do with a baby in one arm. I also started journaling again. Not just the bad stuff, the good too. The way my baby smiled when he farted in his sleep, the smell of Emily's cinnamon toast. The first day I didn't cry. And then one day, 3 weeks after I left, Josh texted, "Can we talk?" Just talk. I stared at the message for a long time, typed and deleted at least 10 responses. Finally, I wrote, "I'll meet you in a public place, coffee shop, tomorrow, noon." The next day, I showed up early. Wore jeans and a soft pink sweater that made me feel like myself again. Not his wife, not a victim, just Lana. Josh looked tired, older, nervous. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded. We sat, silence for a minute. Then he said, "I'm sorry for everything." I panicked. I let my mom get in my head. I messed up. I let him talk. Let him list every excuse, every regret. When he finished, I asked, "Why didn't you defend me, even once?" He looked down. I don't know, I think I was scared. That if I pushed back, she'd turn on me too. That hit harder than I expected, because it was the truth. And also the exact problem. "You chose comfort over courage," I said. He flinched. "I'm not coming back," I added. "At least not now. Maybe not ever." His eyes filled, but he didn't argue. Maybe he finally realized this wasn't just about Bree or his mother or the DNA test. It was about everything he didn't do. Every moment he watched me drown and offered no rope. "Can I see the baby?" he asked. "You can. We'll figure something out. But I'm not exposing him to your mother until I know she respects me." He nodded. For once, no protest. We sat there a little longer. Two people who had once shared a bed, a dream, a life, now trying to draw boundaries on broken ground. Afterward, I walked out of the coffee shop into the sun and took the deepest breath I'd taken in months. That night, I emailed a lawyer, not to start a war, but to build a foundation. One that couldn't be shaken by doubt, disrespect, or denial. This wasn't the ending of a marriage. It was the beginning of me. The first thing my lawyer said was, "You're not the first woman to sit across from me like this. But if you do this, you need to be clear about what you want." What did I want? It was the question I had avoided for weeks, maybe longer. Did I want to fix my marriage? Or did I want freedom? Did I want Josh to fight for me? Or did I want him to quietly fade out of the picture like a character written off mid-season? The truth was somewhere in between. I didn't want a hero. I didn't need a rescue. I needed peace, clarity, a clean slate. I wanted my life back. Or maybe I wanted to build a new one where I didn't have to beg to be believed. "Let's talk custody," she said, flipping open a legal pad. The words hit me like a slap. Not because I was afraid Josh had never been abusive or violent, but because I realized this was real. There would be paperwork, hearings, negotiations, maybe even court. This wasn't about who forgot to buy milk or who left dishes in the sink. This was about my child, my son. And I needed to protect him, not just from Josh, but from the slow, quiet poison of being raised in a house where women were treated like whispers in the background. I told my lawyer everything. About the accusations, the affair, the silence, the DNA test. The way his mother looked at my son like he was a question mark, not a blessing. She took notes, asked for documentation. I gave her printouts, screenshots, dates. I handed over a folder filled with months of journals, my memory in ink. Every sharp word, every cold shoulder, every moment I had to hold myself together while the people around me tried to pull me apart. She nodded. We'll start with legal separation, file for physical custody. You'll stay primary caregiver. He gets supervised visitation. No overnights for now. It sounded clinical, dry, like we were drafting plans for a construction site, not untangling a life. But that's what it was in the end. Demolition, clearing the wreckage, making space for something new. I left the office and sat in my car for 15 minutes before I even started the engine. I gripped the steering wheel and stared out the windshield. My reflection stared back from the glass, tired, pale, but not broken. I was done crying for people who wouldn't raise their voices for me. That night, I told Emily everything. She hugged me and said, "It's about time." A week later, the papers were served. Josh didn't call, didn't text. He signed, quietly, like he knew there wasn't much left to save. Instead, Alina did what Alina always did. She reacted like a woman betrayed. The message was short. "You're destroying our family." I didn't respond. The next day, she emailed again, this time with a Bible verse attached. I didn't open it. Then came the voicemail. "A child needs a father, Lana. You'll ruin him, just like you ruined Josh." I blocked her. 2 days later, Josh showed up at Emily's apartment. I opened the door and stared at him. He looked smaller, not physically but emotionally, like he'd been slowly deflating since I left. "I just want to see him," he said. I let him in. Watched him cradle our son in his arms like he was something fragile and foreign. He sat on the edge of the couch and whispered things I couldn't hear. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, trying not to feel anything. "You never fought for me," I said. He looked up. His eyes were glassy. I didn't know how. "No, you just didn't." We agreed on a visitation schedule. Saturdays only, for 2 hours. Supervised, Emily would be there. I wasn't ready to leave my baby alone, not yet, maybe not ever. The first visit was strained. Josh brought a small toy and tried to make small talk. I kept the answers short, polite, cold. By the third visit, something had shifted. He stopped trying to talk to me and just focused on our son. He changed diapers, warmed bottles, rocked him to sleep. It was the first time I saw Josh not as the man who failed me, but as a man trying to be better. Trying. Slowly, meanwhile, Alina wasn't done. She sent flowers, then letters. Then she started showing up, once at Emily's job, once at my old church, once outside the pediatrician's office. Emily threatened to call the police. I finally filed a no-contact order. My lawyer said it was the right call. I didn't argue. That week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a day for myself. I dropped the baby off with Emily and went to the botanical gardens. I walked in silence, smelled flowers, watched butterflies, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel watched, judged, doubted. I was just Lana, a woman, a mother, a survivor. I signed up for a support group that night. Sat in a room with women who looked nothing like me, and yet felt exactly like me. We didn't talk much that first meeting, but the silence was comforting. We were a room full of open wounds learning how to scar. The next Saturday, Josh brought a turtle plushie, said the baby wouldn't let go of it in the store. "He named it Courage," Josh said with a small smile. I almost cried, almost laughed, because that's what we were all doing, wasn't it? Trying to hold on to courage. Courage to stay. Courage to walk away, courage to draw the line. And that day I realized I had finally stepped over mine. It was the 4th Saturday in a row. Josh showed up right on time, holding a paper bag with baby wipes and 2 fresh pacifiers. He looked more put together than usual. His hair combed, a clean shirt, the slightest smell of aftershave like he was trying to reclaim an identity he'd lost. Or maybe create a new one. "Hey," he said as I opened the door. "Emily's in the back," I answered, stepping aside. He headed toward the nursery, already familiar with the route. I stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to him talk to our son in a voice soft and silly. The kind of voice he never used with me. I should have felt comforted. Instead, I felt haunted, because here was the version of Josh I had begged for. And now that he was showing up piece by piece, I didn't know if I wanted him anymore. The visitation went smoothly. He fed the baby, changed him, played peekaboo until they both giggled. And when it was over, he lingered by the door. "Do you ever think about trying again?" I blinked. "Josh. Not now, I just mean. Someday, you and me." His eyes weren't pleading. They were hopeful, but hope without accountability is just denial in disguise. "I think about the woman I used to be," I said, "and how hard she tried to get you to listen. I think about how she cried in bathrooms and made excuses for you to her own reflection. I'm not her anymore." He nodded, didn't argue. That silence was the closest thing to respect he'd ever shown me. That night, I journaled for 2 hours. The words poured out of me like I'd been holding them behind a dam. Pages filled with thoughts I hadn't admitted out loud. About motherhood, about forgiveness, about how sometimes closure doesn't come with a conversation, but with clarity. And then came the email. It was from a leaner. Subject: family doesn't give up. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The message was long, rambling, a mix of guilt trips and nostalgia. She wrote about Josh's childhood, how she raised him alone after his father left, how she only wanted what was best for him. Then, buried between paragraphs, a sentence. "I only questioned your child because I couldn't believe he'd finally found someone he didn't want to leave." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even close. It was justification dressed up in sentiment. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed it, highlighted that one sentence, and filed it in the growing folder my lawyer had labeled documentation. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. It was Josh. He wasn't holding flowers or gifts, just a manila envelope and a look of quiet determination. "I talked to her," he said. "Told her she can't contact you anymore. That if she does, I'll go no contact too." I stood frozen. "Why now?" "Because I finally get it," he said. "You weren't trying to break up the family, you were trying to protect it. And I let her make you the villain." It wasn't a grand speech. No dramatic music. Just a man, late but maybe not too late, standing in front of the truth for once. "I'm not asking for anything," he said, placing the envelope on the console table. "It's the updated visitation agreement. You can look it over. I signed it already." And then he left. Emily came out moments later, towel on her head, raising an eyebrow. "Did he just do something decent?" I laughed. "Yeah, I think he did." For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. I sat on the couch with my son, who was just starting to babble, and whispered to him, "Someday, when you're older, I'll tell you everything. Not to make you choose sides, but to show you that even in silence, a woman can speak her truth." I thought that when Josh finally stood up to his mother, things would get easier. I was wrong. Peace isn't a quiet house or a signed paper. It's what happens when the storm ends and you're left standing in the debris, wondering what parts of yourself you're still allowed to keep. The next few weeks blurred together in a strange, still rhythm. The baby hit milestones, first giggle, first time rolling over, and Josh kept his distance, sticking to the new visitation agreement without complaint. Alina disappeared. No calls, no emails, no surprise visits. Her silence was suspicious, but I wasn't going to dig. Let her stay buried in whatever narrative she needed to tell herself. But one morning, I got a call from my lawyer. "Lana, we need to meet. It's urgent." I dropped everything, heart pounding, and drove straight to her office. The look on her face told me everything before she even opened the folder. Alina's filed for grandparents' rights. I blinked. She's what? She's petitioning for court-ordered visitation. Says she has a strong emotional bond with your son and that you're denying her access out of personal resentment. My stomach flipped. My hands turned cold, but she does. I mean, she barely saw him, and when she did, it was to insult me or question his existence. I believe you, my lawyer said, but she has resources and connections. It's not an impossible case to fight, but it will be exhausting. I sank into the chair. I can't believe this woman. After everything, she still wants control. Control is all some people know, my lawyer said quietly. We drafted a formal response. Included the no-contact order, every voicemail, every email, every moment documented in my journal. My lawyer was sharp, relentless, but she also warned me it could take months, maybe more. When I told Josh, he looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. I told her to back off, he said. I told her. Then maybe it's time you tell her again, in front of a judge. He hesitated. You want me to testify? I want you to be honest, finally, completely. He agreed. The next few days were a blur of affidavits, statements, legal prep. I barely had time to breathe, let alone eat. Emily stepped in like the warrior she was, babysitting, cooking, even organizing my documents into color-coded binders. This woman picked the wrong mother to mess with, she muttered over a pile of evidence. But despite the support, something in me cracked the night before the hearing. I stood in the shower, water running cold, and let out a scream I didn't know I was holding. Not from fear, from fury. How dare she? How dare Alina try to use the legal system to force her way into my son's life when she had never once loved him for real? The next morning, I dressed in navy blue, power color, tied my hair back tight. No makeup beyond a thin layer of foundation. I wanted the court to see me as I was, a mother, not a spectacle. Josh arrived separately. He sat next to me in the waiting area, hands clasped. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm ready." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined, more intimate. Alina sat across the aisle, lips pursed, wearing a pearl necklace I recognized from our wedding day. She looked like the picture of decorum, but I knew better. She took the stand first, spoke in calm, calculated phrases, referred to my son as my grandson over and over, spoke about connection, attachment, and how devastated she'd been since our separation. Then I took the stand. I didn't cry, I spoke slowly, clearly, recounted every comment, every time she implied my child was a mistake. I referenced specific dates, provided screenshots, played one of the voicemails aloud. "A child needs a father, Lana. You'll ruin him, just like you ruined Josh." The courtroom went quiet. Then Josh was called. He looked at me once before he spoke. Then he faced the judge. "My mother loves appearances," he said. "She doesn't love people. She never supported Lana. She insulted her, doubted her. She never once asked to hold our baby without questioning if he was even mine. I don't think she deserves court-ordered access. I don't trust her to nurture him, only to control him." His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. When it was over, the judge asked for time to review, said we'd have a decision in 2 weeks. As we left the courthouse, Josh turned to me. "I meant what I said in there." I nodded. "I know." We stood for a moment on the courthouse steps. Just two people who had lived a hurricane. Not lovers, not enemies, just survivors. That night, I put my son to sleep with a hand on his chest and whispered, "I will never stop protecting you, even when it costs me everything." 2 weeks. It felt like a lifetime. Every day that passed between the hearing and the judge's decision crawled by like it was dragging a boulder behind it. I tried to focus on work, on my son, on anything that didn't remind me that a stranger held my peace in their hands. Emily kept me sane. She made me laugh when I wanted to cry, handed me coffee before I could ask, and threatened to key Alina's car more than once. She was rage and love in equal measure, and I needed both. Josh stayed quiet. He didn't text, didn't call, but he showed up every Saturday like clockwork, doing everything he could to keep our son smiling. There was a new steadiness to him, less desperate, more grounded. Maybe testifying had broken something loose in him. Or maybe, for once, he realized that this wasn't about me anymore, or his mother, or even himself. It was about the little boy he held like a fragile promise. On the 14th day, I got the email. Ruling available, case no. 327 GR Family Court. My hand hovered over the mouse for a solid minute. My heart thudded in my throat as I clicked. The decision was 5 pages long. Legal language, footnotes, citations. I skimmed until I found the one paragraph that mattered. In consideration of submitted evidence, testimony from both parents, and prior history of interaction, the court does not find sufficient grounds to grant the petitioner mandatory visitation rights under Texas Family Code. The motion is denied. I sat back, let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. It was over. Eleanor had lost, and more importantly, my son had won. Emily screamed when I told her, jumped up and down in the kitchen like we'd won the lottery. She popped open a bottle of cheap champagne she kept for emotional emergencies only. We toasted with paper cups and cried into our pizza. Later that night, I stood over the crib and watched my son sleep. His little chest rose and fell in rhythmic peace. No court document could capture the weight of what we had just survived. I didn't just win a case. I reclaimed my right to decide who was worthy of my child's love. The next morning, Josh texted, I heard, I'm glad, truly. I typed and deleted a dozen responses before finally sending, thank you, for testifying, it mattered. He replied with a single heart emoji. I stared at it for a long time before putting my phone face down. I didn't want a new beginning with Josh, but I was ready for something else. Closure. The next few days were the lightest I had felt in years. I returned calls, took long walks, smiled more. I even updated my resume and sent out a few job applications. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel like more than a survivor. Then came the envelope. Thick, cream-colored, no return address. Inside was a single handwritten letter from Eleanor. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now. I see what I became, what I did, what I let happen. I'm sorry for everything. You don't have to reply. I just wanted to say it before I go. E. I read it twice. The first time as a daughter-in-law who had once longed for approval. The second time as a mother who no longer needed it. I folded it, placed it in the back of the same binder where I kept the legal documents. Not out of spite. Not out of fear, out of grace. Because some endings don't come with fireworks or grand speeches. Sometimes they're quiet, honest, earned. That night, I sat on the balcony, my son asleep inside, and wrote in my journal, this isn't revenge. This is restoration. This is what happens when a woman chooses herself without needing to apologize. And for the first time since it all began, I slept without dreaming. Grief doesn't only follow death. Sometimes it follows relief. Sometimes, when you finally lay your weapons down, you feel the weight of every battle you've survived. The week after the court ruling, I found myself grieving. Not for Josh. Not even for Eleanor, but for the version of me who had waited so long for permission to feel safe. She was gone now. In her place was someone new, someone I was still getting to know. My support group met on Tuesday evenings. That week I brought cookies. Not store-bought, but homemade, chocolate chip with sea salt, the recipe I hadn't touched since college. It felt like a small reclaiming. The women smiled. One hugged me without asking. Another touched my hand and said, you look lighter. And I did. I had started wearing colors again. Bright ones, yellows, greens, even red ones, which made Emily fake faint in our kitchen. You're glowing, she told me one morning, sipping her coffee. People are going to think you're pregnant again. Let them, I laughed. Let them think whatever they want. I've spent too much time trying to control the narrative. I just want to live now. Josh and I fell into a rhythm. Polite texts, coordinated pickups. No drama, no bitterness. We were co-parents. Functional, respectful, he didn't ask for more, I didn't offer, sometimes he lingered. Looked like he wanted to say something, but he never did, and I never pressed. Some doors are better left closed. One afternoon, I bumped into an old colleague at the park. Her name was Rita, sharp, kind, and refreshingly nosy. "You back in the game yet?" she asked, gesturing to the laptop open in my stroller. "A little freelancing here and there." "We've got an opening at the agency," she said. "Nothing big, but a foot in the door again. You interested?" I hesitated, not because I wasn't ready, but because, for the first time in years, I wanted to make a choice slowly. "I'll think about it," I said. I walked home humming. My son babbled in the stroller, waving a chubby hand at birds he couldn't name yet. The sun was warm, the sidewalk uneven. Life was unfiltered, and I was okay with that. That night, I finally opened a document I had been avoiding for months, my personal story. Not the journals, not the legal statements, a memoir, or maybe just a collection of letters, I didn't know yet. But the first line came easily. "This is the story of a woman who was doubted, erased, and underestimated, and lived to rewrite the ending." I typed until midnight. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a small package. No note, just my name written in careful cursive. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a turtle. I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. Josh was no longer trying to win me back, but maybe he had figured out how to respect the distance. I slipped the bracelet on and stood at the window, my fingers brushing the charm. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Not for love, not for forgiveness, not even for closure. I had everything I needed already. And the future, uncertain, messy, beautifully mine, was finally beginning to bloom. Spring came early. The trees outside my window bloomed like they were trying to make up for lost time. Pink, white, green. The whole street was bursting with life. My son stood on the windowsill, fingers pressed to the glass, pointing and laughing at every bird that dared to land on the railing. He was growing so fast, walking now, mumbling half-words with full conviction. His laugh had become my favorite song. The quiet had become our home. I didn't think about Alina much anymore, not with anger, not even with bitterness. She had faded into something dull in the background, a warning, not a wound. Sometimes grief is just the echo of what could have been if people had chosen love instead of pride. Josh had settled into his role, too, every other weekend. No surprises. Sometimes he stayed for an hour, sometimes the full afternoon. He brought books, snacks, patience. One Sunday, as he buckled our son into his car seat, he looked at me and said, "Thank you for letting me still be here." I didn't answer with words, just nodded, because some forgiveness doesn't need a ceremony, it just needs time and consistency. That night, I sat down to write again. The memoir, if that's what it was, had become more than just pages. It was a mirror, one that let me see how far I'd come, and how many women might need to read something like this just to feel less alone. I submitted a sample to 3 publishers, then forgot about it, because I wasn't chasing a dream. I was just telling the truth. 2 weeks later, an email landed in my inbox. Subject, "We love your voice." A small indie press, a real editor, a book deal, not massive, not flashy, but enough to get it out there. I cried in the laundry room so my son wouldn't see. Not because I doubted myself, but because for the first time, someone I didn't know had seen me and believed me. Emily took me out that night. We wore dresses, shared a bottle of wine. She toasted with a grin to being the heroine of your own damn story. And I believed her. 1 year later, the book was released. I held the first copy in my hands and thought, this is more than paper. This is every tear, every night I didn't think I'd make it. Every time I bit my tongue or swallowed my pride or stood in front of a judge and said, "No more." I named it the truth you tried to erase. Reviews trickled in. Messages, too. From women, from daughters, from strangers who felt less invisible because someone had said it first. Then one day an envelope arrived, no return address. Again, inside, a photo. My son asleep in Josh's arms, taken from across the room. And a note in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a year. He looks happy. You did good. No manipulation, no guilt, just 10 words. The closest she'd ever come to grace. I tucked the photo into the back cover of the book, not as forgiveness, but as a reminder that healing isn't clean. It's complicated, messy, and sometimes unfinished, but it's still healing. That evening, I took my son to the park. He ran ahead of me, chasing a butterfly, his tiny feet barely touching the ground. I watched him, heart full, and whispered, "You are not the start of my story, but you are the best part of it." And as the sun dipped below the trees, I knew I had finally told the whole truth, and the truth had set me free.